Bangkok is known as the city that never sleeps. But after 2 a.m., its empty streets become the stage for something far more terrifying. In tonight's video, we explore 3 chilling allegedly true stories of Bangkok's ghost taxis. A young woman in white desperately trying to reach a temple she never arrived at. A dead man who continues to hail cabs in an attempt to return home. And a cursed taxi that carries lost souls through the darkness. Turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself for a journey into the supernatural, because after hearing these stories, you may never look into a taxi's rearview mirror the same way again. Story 1. The taxi ride at 2:17 a.m. In Bangkok, people often say that this city never sleeps. Even long after midnight, the streets are still filled with the sound of motorcycles speeding by, the laughter and chatter of drunk people outside bars, and the distant rumble of trains running overhead like steel snakes gliding through the darkness. But taxi drivers who work the night shift know a different Bangkok. It is the Bangkok that appears after 2 a.m., when the rain has just stopped. When the narrow alleys behind tall buildings become cold and deserted. When pale yellow streetlights shine onto wet roads like the eyes of the dead. And most importantly, it is the time when strange passengers begin to appear. Chai had been driving a taxi for more than 10 years. He was not rich, but he was not struggling either. Every night, he usually drove from Sukhumvit to Ratchada, then circled back through Sathorn, occasionally picking up tourists in Khao San Road or office workers heading home after a late shift. Chai was not a superstitious person. He had heard many stories from other taxi drivers. Some claimed they had driven a woman to a cemetery only to discover the back seat covered in mud afterward. Some received ride requests through an app, only to find that the pickup location was a morgue. Others swore they had seen a child sitting on the roof of their taxi while crossing Rama 8 bridge. Whenever he heard such stories, Chai would simply laugh. "You're just tired from driving at night and imagining things," he would often say. But after that night, Chai never laughed again. That night, a heavy rainstorm swept through the city. A little after 1 a.m., Bangkok was covered in damp mist. Neon signs blurred behind the curtain of rain, casting red and blue reflections across the windshield. The old taxi's windshield wipers squeaked rhythmically, sounding like someone scraping their fingernails against glass. Chai had just dropped off a drunk passenger near Ratchada. The man vomited on the roadside before staggering into an alley, leaving behind the strong smell of alcohol inside the taxi. Chai cracked the window open slightly for fresh air, turned the radio down low, and planned to stop for coffee at a rest station. As the taxi passed an old bus stop, the dashboard clock displayed exactly 2:17 a.m. That was when Chai saw her. She was standing alone beneath the bus stop shelter. The first thing that caught Chai's attention was not her white dress, nor her long hair hanging down on both sides of her face. It was the way she stood. Perfectly upright. Completely motionless. Both hands held a brown cloth bag tightly against her chest, as though she had been waiting there for a very long time. There was nobody around. No motorcycles. No pedestrians. Not even the sound of barking dogs. Chai slowed down. Normally, night drivers were cautious about picking up someone standing alone in a deserted area. But the young woman did not look dangerous. She simply looked sad. A heavy, silent sadness that made it difficult for anyone to ignore her. Chai pulled over. The rear door opened. The young woman stepped into the taxi so lightly that the vehicle barely moved. The moment the door closed, a wave of cold air swept toward the front seat. Chai shivered, assuming it was because she had just been standing outside in the rain. "Where are you going?" he asked. The young woman answered in a very soft voice. "Wat Wa Lamphong." Chai paused slightly. Wat Wa Lamphong was a famous temple in Bangkok. During the day, many people came there to pray, make merit, release animals, and donate money to buy coffins for the poor. But at this hour, nearly 2:30 in the morning, it was rare for anyone to visit the temple alone. "The temple is closed at this hour," Chai said. The young woman remained silent for a few seconds before replying. "I know." Chai looked at her through the rearview mirror. Her head was lowered. Her wet black hair covered most of her face. Both hands clutched the cloth bag tightly. Her fingers were pale. Her fingernails had a faint purple tint. Chai tried to reassure himself. Maybe she had just gone through something painful. Maybe she wanted to pray at the temple. Bangkok was a huge city, and every night there were people carrying secrets of their own. The taxi continued forward. The rain had stopped, but water still streamed along the edge of the road. The buildings on both sides stood silent, their windows black and empty. Occasionally they passed a late-night food stall that was still open. But within seconds its light faded behind them and disappeared into the darkness. The air inside the taxi grew colder and colder. Chai glanced at the air conditioning controls. He had already set them to the lowest level, yet cold air continued to flow out in waves. The rear windows slowly began to fog up from the inside. To break the silence, Chai turned on the radio. At first, only an old Thai song played. But after a few seconds, the sound became distorted and turned into a long burst of static. Chai switched channels. Every station was filled with interference. Then suddenly, a woman crying came through the speakers. It was not singing. It was not part of a song. It was the sound of real sobbing. Very close, as if someone were pressing her face directly against a microphone while crying. Chai quickly switched the radio off. The taxi instantly fell silent. He could hear his own breathing clearly. But from the back seat, the young woman made no sound at all. Chai swallowed hard. "Are you going to the temple for a relative?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. After a long pause, the young woman finally replied, "For my mother." "How long has she been gone?" "A long time." "Then why are you going now?" The young woman raised her head slightly. "I was too late." Those words sent a chill down Chai's spine. The taxi continued moving forward. Chai began to notice that something about the road ahead was not right. He had driven this route thousands of times. The route from Ratchada to Wat Wah Lamphong was not complicated. But tonight, the streets looked strangely unfamiliar. The signs seemed blurred by the rain. Traffic lights changed from red to green and back to red again, even though there were no other vehicles around. As they approached an intersection, Chai instinctively prepared to turn left. Suddenly, the young woman spoke from the back seat. "Don't go that way." Chai flinched. "Why?" "That's where I died." Chai's hands froze on the steering wheel. He looked into the rearview mirror. This time, the young woman was looking directly at him. In the darkness, her eyes were wide open. Not angry. Not threatening. Just terrifyingly empty. Chai forced a nervous smile. "What are you talking about? You're sitting right here." The young woman tilted her head slightly. "Are you sure?" At that exact moment, a truck roared past beside the taxi, blasting its horn. Chai jerked the wheel in surprise. The taxi nearly crashed into the divider. He cursed under his breath as his heart pounded wildly. When he finally regained control of the vehicle, he looked back into the mirror. The back seat was empty. The young woman was gone. Chai slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched across the wet pavement. He spun around. Nobody was there. The rear door was still closed. The windows were still fogged. But the young woman was no longer inside the taxi. Chai felt his entire body go numb. With trembling hands, he switched on the interior light. A dim yellow glow spread across the back seat. The brown cloth bag was still there. Chai did not want to touch it. But something compelled him to open it. He pulled over to the side of the road, locked the doors, and slowly reached for the bag. It was freezing cold. Inside were an old wallet, an identification photo of the young woman, a worn red string bracelet, and a yellowed newspaper clipping folded into quarters. Chai unfolded the clipping. It was a news report about an accident that had happened 3 years earlier on Ratchada Road. A taxi had been struck broadside by a truck at exactly 2:17 a.m. The passenger, a young woman named Molly, had died instantly. According to the article, Molly had been on her way to Wat Wah Lamphong to perform a memorial ceremony for her mother. But she never arrived. Chai stared at the identification photo. It was the same young woman who had been sitting in the back seat of his taxi. He threw the bag onto the seat and rushed out of the vehicle. The cool night air helped clear his head slightly, but his legs were still shaking. He called a fellow taxi driver. Then he called the police. When the police arrived, they inspected the taxi, examined the bag, and reviewed Chai's dashboard camera footage. The front camera showed the taxi stopping beside the old bus stop at exactly 2:17 a.m. The rear door opened by itself. The vehicle visibly sank slightly, as if someone had stepped inside. But the camera inside the taxi showed nothing. The back seat remained empty from beginning to end. Even more disturbing was the audio recording. Besides Chai's voice, there was another voice. A very faint female voice. The police had to increase the volume before they could hear it clearly. When Chai asked, "Where are you going?" the female voice answered, "Wat Wa Lam Phong." After that incident, Chai stopped driving for an entire month. He took the cloth bag to Wat Wa Lam Phong and asked the monks to perform a memorial service. An elderly monk listened to the story and sighed deeply. "There are souls," he said, "who do not know they are dead. Or perhaps they refuse to accept that they left this world without completing the final thing that mattered to them." Chai asked, "Will she appear again?" The monk remained silent for a long time before answering. "As long as someone stops their taxi, she still has hope of reaching her destination." At the time, Chai did not understand what the monk meant. A few weeks later, another taxi driver working in the Ratchada area shared a strange story. He claimed that he, too, had seen a young woman in a white dress standing at the old bus stop. It was a little after 2 a.m. Something about her appearance felt so unsettling that he decided not to stop. He simply drove past. But as he continued down the road, he glanced into the rearview mirror. And there she was, sitting in the back seat, her head lowered, the brown cloth bag resting in her arms. Then she spoke. "Why didn't you give me a ride?" The driver panicked. He swerved toward the side of the road and slammed on the brakes. When he turned around, the young woman had vanished. But on the rear window, words slowly appeared through the condensation. Just two numbers. 217. After that, stories about the old bus stop in Ratchada began spreading among Bangkok taxi drivers. No one knew how much of the story was true. But many drivers swore that on rainy nights, if you happened to pass that bus stop at exactly 2:17 a.m., you would see a young woman dressed in white standing beneath the shelter. She would not wave for help. She would not call a taxi. She would not step into the road. She would simply stand there, holding a brown cloth bag, staring silently at every taxi that passed by. And if a driver chose to stop, she would step into the vehicle and sit quietly in the back seat, leaving behind the cold, damp smell of a room that had been sealed shut for years. Then she would speak in a very soft voice. "Please take me to Wat Wa Lam Phong." Eventually, Chai sold his taxi. He found work as a security guard at a small apartment complex. He never drove at night again. Yet even many years later, whenever it rained, he would often wake suddenly at exactly 2:17 a.m. At those moments, he would always hear the sound of a car door closing somewhere inside his mind. Click. And then a distant, sorrowful female voice would whisper from behind him, "Sir, will you help me reach my destination this time?" The end. Story 2. The passenger who never got out of the taxi. Among Bangkok's night taxi drivers, there is a saying that has been passed around for many years. If you pick up a passenger at the back gate of a hospital after midnight, look carefully into your rearview mirror. No one knows where that saying came from. Some say it is merely a story used to scare new drivers. Others insist they have witnessed things that cannot be explained. Somchai used to belong to the first group. At that time, he was 38 years old and had been driving a taxi for nearly 15 years. His life was not wealthy, but it was stable. He slept during the day and started driving at 7 p.m. until almost dawn. He liked the night shift. The roads were emptier. Passengers were more generous. And most importantly, he could earn enough money to support his wife and his 6-year-old daughter. The night when the story happened was a humid night in July. There was no rain, but the air felt unusually heavy. Dark clouds covered the sky over Bangkok, making the city feel as though it had been trapped beneath a giant lid. At approximately 12:47 a.m., Somchai's phone vibrated. A new ride request. The pickup location shown on the map was behind an old hospital near Siloam. He frowned. That area was not a place drivers like to visit at night. The hospital had once been very busy, but many years earlier its operations had been reduced. Some of the buildings in the back were almost completely abandoned. Even so, the fare was quite high. Somchai accepted the ride. 10 minutes later, he arrived. The road behind the hospital was pitch black. Only an old fluorescent light flickered on a stained wall. There was nobody there. Somchai pressed the call button. The phone connected. No one spoke. There was only breathing. Very faint breathing. Steady. Cold. As though the caller were standing right beside him. "Hello? Where are you?" No answer. Only breathing. Somchai began to lose patience. He was about to cancel the ride when he suddenly heard the rear door open. Click. Startled, he looked into the mirror. A man was sitting there. Somchai swore that the back seat had been completely empty just moments before. But now there was a man around 50 years old sitting behind him. He wore a gray shirt, black trousers. His hair was wet as though he had just been caught in heavy rain. The strangest thing was that his clothes were completely clean even though it had not rained at all. The man stared out the window. Without blinking. Without moving. "Are you the passenger who booked the ride?" "Yes." His voice was deep and hoarse, as though it came from a dry, stiff throat. Somchai looked at the screen. The destination was an old apartment complex on the outskirts of Bangkok. About 40 minutes away. He started the engine. The trip began. The first 10 minutes passed normally. No one spoke. Inside the taxi there was only the sound of the engine and the air conditioner. Then Somchai noticed the temperature beginning to drop. At first, he thought he was imagining it. But only a few minutes later, goosebumps covered both of his arms. He looked at the dashboard. The air conditioner was set to 26 degrees Celsius. Yet the air coming out felt more like 16 degrees. Somchai turned the temperature up. It had no effect. The air remained freezing cold. After a while, he decided to make conversation. "Do you live in that apartment complex?" The man did not answer. "Were you just at the hospital?" Several seconds passed. Then the man replied, "I just left there." "Do you have a relative in the hospital?" "No." "Then what were you doing there?" The man slowly turned his head. His eyes were completely black, reflecting no light at all. "I died there." Somchai forced an awkward laugh. He assumed the passenger was joking. But the smile quickly disappeared. Because the man was not smiling. He simply stared at the back of Somchai's neck. Without blinking. Without expression. As though he was completely serious. Somchai decided to remain silent. The taxi continued through the night. Around 1:20 a.m., they passed through a quiet stretch of road. Street lights stretched into pale yellow streaks. Suddenly, the radio turned on by itself. Static filled the car. Then a female announcer's voice came through. "Death announcement at 11:12 p.m. The sound then dissolved into distortion. Somchai switched off the radio. It turned itself back on. He switched it off again. The radio continued playing. This time the woman's voice was clearer. "Mr. Naren has passed away." A chill ran down Somchai's spine. The name on the ride request was Naren. He glanced quickly at the mirror. The man in the back seat was still sitting there. But his face seemed paler than before. So pale that he resembled a corpse that had just been removed from a morgue. For the first time, Somchai felt truly uneasy. He wanted the trip to end as quickly as possible. When they were about 5 minutes from the destination, his phone vibrated. An incoming call. The screen displayed Siloam Hospital. Surprised, Somchai answered. A woman's hurried voice spoke. "Excuse me, are you the driver currently carrying Mr. Naren?" "Yes." The caller fell silent for a few seconds. Then she asked, "Where are you right now?" Somchai told her. The woman gasped. "That's impossible. What happened?" Her voice trembled. "Mr. Naren died more than 2 hours ago." The blood in Somchai's body seemed to freeze. He looked into the mirror. The back seat was empty. No one was there. No one at all. Yet he could still hear breathing. Right beside his ear. Somchai screamed. The taxi swerved violently, nearly crashing into the roadside barrier. He spun around. There was nobody there. No figure. Nothing. Yet the back seat remained depressed as though someone were still sitting there. At that moment, a voice spoke. Very close. "I still haven't gone home." Somchai slammed his foot on the accelerator. His whole body was shaking. Sweat poured down his face. He no longer cared about the fare. He only wanted to escape. But when he reached the destination shown on the map, the phone automatically announced, "You have arrived." In front of him stood an abandoned apartment complex. Every window was dark. The walls were covered in moss. Weeds grew up to knee height. Not a single person was there. Suddenly, the rear door opened. Click. A wave of cold air flowed out, as though someone had just stepped out. Somchai looked into the mirror. The back seat was completely empty. But on the thin layer of dust covering the window, words began to appear. Each stroke emerged as though written by an invisible finger. "Thank you." Somchai immediately turned the taxi around and drove away. He did not dare look back. He did not dare stop. He did not dare think about what had just happened. The next morning, he went to the hospital to investigate. After asking around several times, an elderly nurse agreed to tell him the story. Mr. Naren had once lived in that abandoned apartment complex. He lived with his wife and son. 5 years earlier, a fire had broken out. His wife and child died. He survived but was completely devastated. From that point on, he frequently visited the hospital for psychiatric treatment. Before he died, he repeated one sentence over and over. "I want to go home." The previous night, he died in his hospital bed at 11:12 p.m. No one at the hospital had booked a taxi. No one had called for a ride. No one knew how that trip had appeared. 3 days later, Somchai decided to stop driving the night shift. He thought everything was over. But it wasn't. 1 week later, at 1 a.m., his phone received a notification from the ride app. A new trip request. Passenger name: Naren. Pickup location: back gate of the hospital. Destination: the abandoned apartment complex. Somchai deleted the app. The notification disappeared. But a few seconds later, the screen lit up again. This time it was not a notification. It was a message. Only a single line. "Thank you for last time." Then another line appeared beneath it. "Tonight, can you take my whole family home?" Somchai threw the phone onto the floor. The screen shattered. But before it went completely dark, he saw the reflection of a man standing behind him in the cracked glass. Wearing a gray shirt. Wet hair. Smiling. And ever since then, among Bangkok taxi drivers, a rumor has continued to exist. If you receive a ride request after 1 a.m. from the back gate of the old hospital in Siloam under the name Naren, it is best not to accept it. Because that passenger died a long time ago. But he is still trying to find his way home. Story 3. The fare meter that returned to zero. People often say that every taxi in Bangkok has its own story. Some taxis have carried tourists from all over the world. Some have witnessed breakups, marriage proposals, arguments, and even the final moments of a person's life. But among veteran taxi drivers, there is a rumor more frightening than all the others. That some taxis do not belong to the living. And if you accidentally buy one of them, you will not only carry passengers, you will carry souls that have not yet been able to leave this world. Prosert first heard that rumor when he was 32 years old. But at the time, he simply laughed. He needed money. His wife was pregnant with their first child. His bank debt kept growing. And the old taxi he was driving kept breaking down. So when he heard that a liquidation yard was selling a green Toyota taxi for half the market price, he immediately went to see it. The vehicle looked quite old. The paint had faded. The leather seats were worn and torn. But the engine was still in good condition. Prosser took it for a few test drives and was very satisfied. While signing the paperwork, the owner of the yard, a man in his 60s, suddenly asked, "Do you drive the night shift?" "Yes." The old man fell silent. A moment later, he said, "If possible, don't drive it after 3 a.m. Prosser laughed. "Why?" The old man looked at the taxi. There was something strange in his eyes. "I told the previous 3 owners the same thing. All 3 returned the car. Why? No one was willing to tell me." Prosser thought the old man was simply trying to create an air of mystery. He signed the papers, paid the money, and drove the taxi home. Everything was completely normal during the first 2 months. The taxi ran well. Few mechanical problems. Good fuel economy. Prosser even thought he had found a bargain. Until one night. That night was August 13th. Bangkok had just experienced a heavy rainstorm. At around 2:50 a.m., Prosser was driving near Rama 8 Bridge. The road along the river was almost completely deserted. The sky was pitch black. Not a single star. Not a breath of wind. The city seemed to be holding its breath. Suddenly, the taxi's fare meter lit up by itself. Click. Prosser looked down. 0 baht. He frowned. There were no passengers in the taxi. He had dropped off his last passenger more than 10 minutes earlier. Maybe the system was malfunctioning. He reached out to turn it off. But at that exact moment, a sound came from the back seat. Creak. As though someone had just sat down. Prosser froze. Slowly, he looked into the rearview mirror. An old woman was sitting there. He had no idea when she appeared. No door opening. No footsteps. No sign whatsoever. She had simply appeared. As if she had been sitting there for a very long time. She wore an old purple floral shirt. Her gray hair was tied into a low bun. She held a red cloth bundle in her arms. Her face was wrinkled. But her eyes were unnaturally black. Good God! Prosser jumped. The taxi nearly drifted into the next lane. The old woman did not react. She simply stared out the window. Ma'am, when did you get into the taxi?" Her voice was very soft. "A long time ago." A chill ran down Prosser's spine. "Where do you want to go?" "Home." "Where is your home?" The old woman slowly raised a thin finger and pointed ahead. "Keep going straight." Prosser swallowed hard. He did not dare argue. The taxi continued moving forward. The fare meter began counting. 20 baht. 35 baht. 50 baht. Normal. But only a few minutes later, the numbers started increasing abnormally fast. 100. 101. 102. 103. 104. Prosser was startled. The meter seemed to have gone insane. He tried turning it off. It didn't work. He tried restarting the system. It didn't work. The numbers continued jumping endlessly. Outside the window, the scenery of Bangkok gradually changed. The familiar buildings disappeared. The billboards disappeared. The gas stations disappeared. The road became endless. On both sides there was only darkness. Dense. Thick. Like a black ocean swallowing everything. Prosser began to panic. "Ma'am, where are we?" The old woman did not look at him. "We're almost there. But this isn't Bangkok." "That's right." The answer nearly stopped his heart. The taxi continued forward. 1.200 baht. 1.800 baht. 2.500 baht. The meter kept rising. Sweat ran down Prosser's back. He started thinking about stopping the car. But at that moment, the old woman spoke. For the first time, her voice became serious. "Don't stop." Prosser tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Why?" "Because they will get in." "Who?" The old woman did not answer. She only stared ahead. A few minutes later, Prossert understood what she meant. At the end of the road, a line of people appeared. Several dozen of them, walking in a long procession, dressed entirely in white, holding candles, heads lowered, like a funeral procession. The terrifying thing was that they were completely silent. No footsteps, no talking, no wind, no sound at all. The taxi moved closer. Prossert felt his throat go dry. Then he realized something. Those people had no shadows. Under the taxi's headlights, not a single one of them cast a shadow. One person, 2 people, 10 people, all of them were the same. Prossert panicked. He slammed on the brakes. Screech. The taxi stopped. At that exact moment, the old woman in the back screamed. For the first time since she appeared, "I told you not to stop." Her voice pierced the air. It did not sound like the voice of an old woman. It sounded like dozens of people screaming at once. The procession ahead slowly raised their heads. Prossert felt the blood freeze in his veins. Their faces were pale white. Their eyes were empty. Their mouths hung open, like corpses staring directly at him. One of them slowly raised an arm and pointed at the taxi. Then another. Then all of them. At the same time, the fare meter emitted a long beep. The number 3.999 baht flashed. Then suddenly returned to 0 baht. Everything went dark. The headlights went out. The engine died. The surroundings sank into absolute darkness. In that darkness, Prossert heard footsteps. Many footsteps. Approaching. From every direction. Clack. 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 The footsteps stopped around the taxi. Then came knocking on the windows. Knock. 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 A pale hand appeared outside. Then another hand. Then another. Dozens of hands covered the windows. Whispers filled the darkness. "Please. Let us come with you. We want to go home. Let us into the taxi." Prossert burst into tears. He had no idea what to do. At that moment, the old woman spoke. Her voice was low and cold. "Go away." A powerful gust of wind erupted. The knocking stopped. The hands disappeared. Everything disappeared. The headlights came back on. The engine started again. The road ahead was empty. No people. No funeral procession. No figures at all. Prossert gasped for breath. His entire body trembled. He looked into the mirror. The old woman was crying. 2 streams of black tears ran down her wrinkled face. "I failed to take them home again," she whispered. Immediately afterward, she vanished. Completely vanished. Only the red cloth bundle remained on the back seat. Prossert pulled over. He opened the bundle. Inside was an old photograph, a small urn of ashes, and a death certificate. The deceased was the old woman herself. The date of death was 12 years earlier. Cause of death: taxi accident on Rama 8 bridge at 3 a.m. Prossert felt numb. The next day, he went to the address written on the certificate. It was an old funeral home. The elderly manager turned pale the moment he saw the photograph. He confirmed that the old woman had hired a taxi to transport her husband's ashes back to her hometown. But the taxi had crashed. Both the old woman and the driver died instantly. What frightened Prossert most was what came next. The manager asked, "What taxi are you driving?" When he heard the license plate number, the old man stepped backward. "I remember that taxi." "Why?" "Because it was the taxi involved in that accident." The blood in Prossert's body seemed to freeze. The taxi he was driving was the death taxi. That night, he decided to return the vehicle to the yard. At approximately 2:59 a.m., he drove to the entrance. Just as he was about to get out, the fare meter lit up by itself. 0 baht. The back seat slowly sank, as though someone had just sat down. Then a familiar voice came through the radio speaker. The old woman's voice. Very soft. Very close. "Tonight, you must take us home." Beyond the windshield, inside the thick fog, Prossert saw hundreds of figures dressed in white standing by the roadside. And every one of them was staring at the taxi.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.